On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, are Jalen Carter and Darius Slay both out for the Birds on Sunday against the Jets? The Jets are pretty banged up too. An injury report, extensions coming midseason from Howie Roseman, LOE3, all that and more on a Friday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by PrizePicks Daily Fantasy. Head over to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. Eagles Jets this Sunday. Jalen Hurts versus not Aaron Rodgers. We had circled this game when the schedule came out as one of those star quarterback battles. Nope, it's going to be Zach Wilson. Eagles heavy favorites in this one right now. I think it's -6.5. Per FanDuel. So we're going to get into this matchup a little more, Gino. Today, lots of injuries on both sides of the ball. I want to talk some extensions with you, and then we'll get into our player props that we're going to ride with from FanDuel in Eagles-Jets. But not great news for the Eagles on defense, and that's really been the name of the game this year when it comes to injuries. They're missing players on defense all the time, kind of like they did pretty much every year before 2022. Looks like no Jalen Carter or Darius Slay in this game, and I think they can obviously still win this game against New York without those two, but those might be two of your, if not your two most important players on defense right now, so definitely not ideal.
The way that Nick Sirianni was talking about both of those injuries just made it seem that these are completely precautionary getting ready for next week.
Well, I hope so,
Miami.
especially with an ankle injury, Gino, like with Jalen Carter. You need, with how good he's been rushing the passer against the run, with his youth, Cox, you need to limit his snaps. You need Jalen Carter.
And Darius Slay, you're going to need next week as well.
Yeah.
And they have lucked into having to go against Zach Wilson again. No, it's not going to be just a walk in the park. Like, this is definitely one of those environments that's like true trap game, a look-ahead game to Miami next week. You're banged up in some big ways with Jalen Carter and Darius Slay. This could be one of those games that if you don't take care of business, it could come back to bite you in the rear end towards the end of the season. But when it's all said and done, Lou, thank goodness Fletcher Cox is coming back. And that dude's ready. If you saw him celebrating the Fightin' Phils at Citizens Bank Park, Lou, he delivered one of the greatest quotes of all time. I just want to deliver this for all of our fans. Yesterday, he was celebrating with the Phils, and he's walking to the locker room, and the guy checking credentials for all the media goes, "Hey, who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Fletcher Cox," and walked right by him. Yes, agreed.
Yeah, how dare that guy ask, "Who are you?" Like, give me a break. Who do you think that is? No, I agree.
Super Bowl champ Fletcher Cox, that's like a big part of your team. And he's going to be a big part this Sunday, Lou. But at the same time, I think about it, and it's like, dude, you still got Jordan Davis. Marlon's going to come back healthy. Contavious Street looks like he has been pretty good as like your last guy off the bench. And you still have Milton Williams. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man. No, I agree. I think it is a little concerning, though. Ankle injuries are also always kind of scary, especially with a guy like Jalen Carter. You want to keep him up running right now with how good he's been. So hopefully this is just precautionary. It's not serious, and it's going to ail him throughout the year, because sometimes ankle injuries don't go away. And with a guy playing this well, you need him, especially next week against Miami. That is the barn burner coming up. So yeah, hopefully that is exactly what it is. And as you mentioned, with the depth they have at defensive tackle, they can get through. And that was the exact same take last week we had when Fletcher Cox missed, and they didn't really skip a beat. So, but Jalen Carter is somebody you need. And same with Darius Slay, Gino. I think he's the guy between him and James Bradberry right now that I'm trusting more when it comes to, like, if there was a guy, let's say this week, that had to shadow Garrett Wilson. And I kind of liked that idea of just shadowing Garrett. And because outside of that, they've got Alan Lazard and nothing really else to write home about at receiver or tight end. So not having Slay stinks, because I think that's a matchup that I don't really love, Bradberry versus Garrett Wilson. But again, at least you do have two CB1s on this roster where, again, same with defensive tackle, the luxury of how deep this team is against a Jets kind of offense, you can get through.
Well, the thing is, you're not just missing Darius Slay. Technically, you're also missing DeVonta Maddox.
You're already down a corner. Exactly.
You're down 67% of your starting cornerbacks.
Yeah. So now it's
but
Job
at the same
and
time, it's that's what I was going to ask you. Like, without giving Job a snap last week, do they feel confident even putting him out there?
Give me some Eli Ricks this week if you're asking me.
I think that might be the move because those guys aren't just training primarily at nickel, him and Goodrich. Ricks is also an outside guy where I honestly like Ricks more outside in my opinion. And especially with Bradley Roby there now, I think the slot is kind of settled down. Like 2 quarters, this guy won a job. It's kind of crazy that he was on the street for that long. But I think the plan of attack has to be, we are going to let James Bradberry cover Garrett Wilson because you're right, Lou. The rest of the time we can go quarter, half of the field. James Bradberry, you're going to cover half. We'll figure it out with Josh Jobe and the 2 safeties in those quarter situations. And Sidney Brown coming back, this might be a huge week for that kid to come back healthy, man. I mean, stepping into a big spot where he might be the 3rd or maybe even the 2nd best coverage guy that you're going to have on the field come this game.
And I think he'll end up starting at safety probably. Justin Evans placed on injured reserve. Was terrible anyway. Obviously, you don't want to see a guy get injured, but he was not great. I think that's an understatement. And then Terrell Edmonds was even worse against the Commanders a few weeks ago. So I think Sidney Brown's going to come back in. I'd probably guess Gino because he was playing in the slot before he got hurt against Tampa Bay. I would guess he rolls back to safety with Reed Blankenship and Roby's probably inside. But I'm with you at corner, like probably have Bradberry, Shadow, Wilson, and I'd rather have Ringo or Ricks at this point over Jobe. I mean, that's kind of where my head's at. I want to see some of these other younger corners get a chance. Even if Bradberry didn't, let's say, shadow Garrett Wilson, though, and there were reps where Roby's on him, or Ricks, or Jobe, or Ringo, whoever, again, against the Jets, if this was Miami, I'd be like, oh, no, we have a legitimate problem, because they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But even with Garrett Wilson, who's a great receiver, I'm not scared of Zach Wilson taking advantage of any sort of mismatch like that anyway, especially considering the mismatch they have with their offensive line, which is very banged up against this Eagles front.
3 of the guys, I mean, including Mekhi Becton, who I mistakenly said was at right tackle on an earlier show this week. He is their left tackle now, which I think is a better matchup for Josh Sweat, in my opinion, because he gives you the best of both worlds. And it's like, what is Mekhi going to have to worry about? Is it speed? Is it power? Is it bend around the edge? And 3 of those guys are banged up. And the one thing that they are going to beat you with, Lou, is having Breece Hall. But the thing is, even with Jalen Carter out, it's like, oh, we have Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox. And you're going to hopefully take away that run game. And it's like, what is the one thing? If you're going to walk into the game Sunday, who is the one guy that we want to take away? It's got to be Garrett Wilson. Number 2's got to be close with Breece Hall. Who's the guy we want to make beat us? You want to make Zach Wilson throw. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. The last time you played him, the few games this season, make him throw. And especially with this defense, especially for him holding the ball for 3 seconds, even without Jalen Carter, those guys are going to hit home, Lou. And that's what it's going to come down to. The front is once again probably going to have to bail out the secondary, but no fault of their own. I know they're missing 67% of the starters at corner. Sidney Brown is just coming back healthy. It's not the easiest way to get through this game, but if you know what this defensive line has done, you should expect them to do exactly that. And it's just a flat circle of us talking about the defensive line having to take away an offensive line that is inferior to them.
And even without Carter, I mean, Milton Williams, when it comes to run defense, he's been a top 5 graded PFF defensive tackle against the runs so far throughout the majority of the year. So that's the thing is, and I mentioned this on the show the other day, I would blitz them. I mean, bring the heat. They're not going to need the blitz per se with this 4-man pass rush against that offensive line, but I would bring the heat anyway. Don't let Zach Wilson, don't make it easy on him with the quick passes, because that might be something the Jets try to do, is get him in a rhythm. That first read is where quarterbacks have had a lot of success this year against the Eagles. Don't even give him an opportunity to breathe. I would send the house at this point, and that would be my strategy at least. So yes, I mean, the injuries to Slay and Carter, not ideal, but better to have a week of rest now. Get that ankle ready for Carter, get Slay healthy, because you have and again, don't overlook the Jets, but you have a massive matchup coming up against the Miami Dolphins in a few weeks. And then, Gino, one more injury to report as well. Looks like Quez Watkins is not going to play in this game, and kind of like Justin Evans, it's addition by subtraction. Olamide Zaccheaus deserved those snaps anyway last week that Quez had. I think this is an upgrade at wide receiver 3. You don't want it to be through injury, but it's almost good that like the Eagles are now forced to not be able to play Quez, because I think as long as he's healthy, they're going to keep throwing him on the field.
And real quick, Nakobe Dean should be coming back too, and I would expect him to be a big part of taking away that run, and Breece Hall wanted to throw that in there. But you're right, addition by subtraction with Justin Evans, in my opinion. He was just playing at a slower pace than that defense was overall. And Quez Watkins has become a player that you win in spite of. And Olamide Zaccheaus, I mean, The guy just continues to come up in big moments when you need him in efficient reps. 2 to 3 catches, 2 to 3 targets. That's all you need. But are you going to block well? Are you going to get downfield and help A.J. Brown score that touchdown? Those are the little things that matter. So it might be the best thing, low-key, that Quez does have that hamstring injury.
No, I totally agree. All right, Gino, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, I want to talk a little bit about extensions. I've been thinking about this with DeAndre Swift and with Haason Reddick heating up lately. Josh Sweat had another amazing yet underrated game against the Rams. We've been talking and thinking about trades outside of the show lately, thinking about, though, midseason contract extensions. Howie Roseman in the past has been famous for this. Could somebody get paid before this year ends? We'll get into that and more coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. I live in Buffalo, New York. Dealt with 2 massive blizzards in November and December of last year. Jace Medical can come through in those types of situations. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. They're simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using our promo code LOCKEDON in all caps, LOCKEDON, at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's jacemedical.com, JASE medical.com for $20 off with the promo code LOCKEDON. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every day. It's a Friday edition of the show. Louis DiBiase alongside Gino Camilleri. Eagles, Jets this Sunday. The Birds trying to get to 6-0 before a massive matchup in a few weeks against the Miami Dolphins. The schedule just going to get tougher and tougher. Gino, I kind of do want to talk about something more long-term, big picture here, because through 5 weeks, there have been some players that have been incredible all year, or they're heating up lately, that could be in for big paydays soon. And what got me thinking about this is the other day, me and you were talking about Haason Reddick and how this guy now has 3 sacks in the last 2 weeks since the cast has come off. All 3 sacks came in a massive spot in the fourth quarter in close one-score games. And you look at, he's the 17th highest paid edge rusher in the NFL. I just wonder if, and Howie Roseman loves to be proactive, get ahead of things, it's going to be tough to make Reddick's contract team friendly, but I do feel like maybe there could be a mid-season contract or two that comes. He's done it before in the past, and when you look at like Reddick, Josh Sweat, DeAndre Swift, there's a lot of guys right now that are playing really well that are due for big contracts.
It was like the one regular season where it was Jordan got a deal and DeVonta got a deal.
Sweat got that other extension before that too.
There were 3 big ones, I think, that year, and those are
Alshon,
those 3
I think,
guys.
got one too in 2017 or 18, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, he only signed for 1 year and they extended him for 4.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
That came in the middle of the year as well. And the thing with Swift, it's like, man, I would love to keep him, but that number's got to be reasonable.
That's the one I wanted to talk to you about for sure.
I'm not paying him Booby Sanders money, man. And look at Miles. I mean,
I'm glad you see it the same way, because Swift has been so good that I wondered if it would start to change the perspective of some people, because he has been the best running back they've had since Shady. But I think even with that, you have to still stay disciplined and say, we can do this and find this again.
To that point, if they ran with just Kenny, would things be a little different? Potentially.
That's a good point.
But at the same time, these guys come out of the draft all of the time. I mean, Oregon, we have 2 guys this year. Like, every school has 2 guys you can draft, essentially. And they're not to the talent of DeAndre Swift, of course, but I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles have gotten by with less, and the way that they build their team, Howie Roseman doesn't like to go away from where he puts assets and where he does not put assets. Running back does not invest a lot of assets. Offensive line invests a lot of assets. So if you're looking at guys in the trenches, Haason Reddick, that's somebody you should be talking to right now. Like, they should be trying to get that deal done right now.
Josh Sweat too, man. I'm not going to pick one or the other. I'm paying both of them.
Yeah, get deals that are on par with each other that you could get in place, because Brian Burns' deal is going to reshape the entire market. Like,
for sure.
It's going to change everything. And then Micah Parsons has to get extended, folks. So get your deals on edge rushers now before it is too late and that entire bubble bursts. Those are the guys that I'm trying to extend. 26, 27-year-old guys that could still play well into their. I think if you extend guys to like 32, that's the good number.
Yeah.
That's why Darius Slay and Bradbury was a little odd. I
It
mean,
also
they
depends
are
on the
still playing
position,
good.
right, Gino?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
Safety, I would have extended Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, like in my opinion, and I would go and add one of these young guys and extend them. Like I'll take on Justin Simmons' contract from Denver. I'll take on Budda Baker's contract.
Jeremy Chin.
I'll take on Jeremy Chin and have to pay him. And those are the things that you're going to do. What are you not going to do? Is probably not pay a running back. I don't think you're going to extend either Morrow or Cunningham unless one of those guys wants to come back for a minimal type of deal, right?
Sure.
And you're kind of solidified a lot of other places except the big name of DeVonta. I think the DeVonta deal is the one that we really have to prioritize, as well as Haason, in my opinion.
And I agree. I think the two biggest contracts are Smith and Reddick, and then Josh Sweat. But you are right, like last year at this point, I think we had the same conversation because there were so many players that were key pieces of that run that were on 1-year contracts, right? Whereas this year, and it's a good thing, it's like, okay, you got Reddick and Smith, you got to prioritize those deals. Swift is a free agent, but outside of that, a lot of these guys are locked up long term.
Landon is the other one that's probably going to cost you a nice
That'll
little chunk
too.
of chain, I would assume. And
you got to pay linemen though, Gino, on both
you
sides.
have to.
And they're all young. Backload those deals, and you can't let any if you're going to go cheap somewhere, it's not at the line on either side. And I don't doubt how he will spend the money there.
And you also have the luxury of potentially, if Brandon Graham is done after this year, Fletcher Cox has 1 or 2 more years.
Sure.
Jordan Davis cost controlled, Jalen Carter cost controlled. The one name that is like, it always is just like in the mix of things because there's so many guys there. It's like, what are they going to offer Milton? Does Milton think he can go and get a big contract out there? Because I believe he can.
I think so too.
He could play, man. Like he could get 16 to 18 and I wouldn't be shocked.
No, I'm with you. And it's not like DeVonta Smith where, you're a wide receiver sharing targets with A.J. Brown, but he's not sharing snaps at all. Milton Williams is playing right now in a lineup with 3 other defensive tackles playing ahead of him. And even if Fletcher Cox were to leave next year, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are the foundation of this interior. And so Milton in that role as that third guy replacing Fletcher Cox would have a much bigger role. But I'm with you. It's like he's already an elite run-stopping defensive tackle. We know how good he is at rushing the quarterback. Williams is an interesting case of, he might ask the question, can I go be a primary 1 or 2 full-time starter on another team instead of a rotational piece, which, again, with the Eagles, it's a subjective term. Like, all these guys play a ton, but you might play more somewhere else.
I think the end goal of any extension that you're going to try and get is, one, you have to pay them for what you are going to get out of them.
Sure.
You don't pay for what they produced, and that's why Howie Roseman, of course, shies away from wanting to pay running backs because how many have their best season and then put up another best season on top of that? It's rare. It's very rare. And DeAndre Swift, this could be like the best season, and then it could be a cliff, or it could be consistent for a couple more years.
Even if he is really good for a few more years, it still won't be worth the money, Gino, when you have to pay all these other names that we mentioned. And again, like, you're right. You made a very interesting point, and I thought about this the other day. It's like they actually needed Swift this year more than we thought because we were actually all pretty satisfied when they brought in Rashad Penny. We're like, okay, they're barely paying Penny. They have Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott. Behind this offensive line and Jalen Hurts, that trio can get through. Looking back now, if DeAndre Swift was not available, if the Lions were smart and didn't draft Jahmyr Gibbs and they kept Swift, right now we would be in trouble because Rashad Penny looks like 2019 Jay Ajayi. They don't even play the guy. Kenneth Gainwell looks average, and Boston Scott is Boston Scott. So they needed him more than we thought, but you still have to stay disciplined because every single year there are so many DeAndre Swift type of situations where you can find another very talented running back in a low market price for one situation or the other because of the devaluation of the position. So I just think you can get caught up in how good he is, and he's a local kid, and he's so fast. He's the best talent they've had since Shady, but you've got to be disciplined with this position.
And they just paid Jalen Hurts, and this contract's kicking in.
And look at the Panthers. They got to regret that Miles Sanders deal, I think.
Oh, man, I feel so
bad for Miles because I feel so bad for him. I love Miles Sanders, but, it's
tough.
It's not fair to them, but this is the reality.
It's a business. I mean, the safety position, like CGJ thought he was going to get 14. He got 6.
And then he gets hurt.
That's the league, man. It's unfortunate, but they're going to pay young, good linemen. I can take it to the bank on that. I mean, if you're going to say anything is surefire. It's Landon's going to get a deal. One of Josh Sweat and Haason Reddick is going to get a deal, if not
Guaranteed.
both.
Yeah.
Probably Milton Williams will get a deal. Your playmaker on the outside, DeVonta, is going to get a deal. And everything else, we can kind of just fill in the blanks like they have been doing. That's really been their MO, like linebacker, safety, running back, outside of Dallas Goedert, tight end, the backup end of wide receivers. It's like we're just going to put guys in the lineup and hopefully we can get by with the top heaviness.
I'm going to keep enjoying this run, though, with Swift, though. Gino, I've been really happy even the last 2 weeks. They've got him way more involved in the passing game, too. I think that's been key, especially on third downs. So, I mean, we'll enjoy the run for 2023. He's going to be a massive piece continuing as they try to win a Super Bowl this season. Did we have some DeAndre Swift bets coming up in LOE 3? We'll get into that coming up next. 3 player props each presented by FanDuel in Eagles Jets.
And this edition of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. If you don't know what PrizePicks is by now, you got to get in on the action. And I'm going to fill you in today. PrizePicks is the #1 place for daily fantasy sports in all of America. And it is quite literally the easiest thing to use. If you could count to 6, you can get in on PrizePicks. All you have to do, pick 2 to 6 players. Say they're going to have more or less than their stat projections. So, for example, Thursday Night Football, did you say Pat Mahomes was going to go more or less than his projected total of passing yards? Well, if you picked more, you hit home on that one. We get in on the action each and every week. We like to stay with the Eagles since it's kind of what we know. So I would stick with Jalen Hurts, more passing yards rather, on this week when it comes to them playing the Jets. They're banged up in the secondary. Jalen Hurts is going to let it fly. But let's say you pick a player and they get injured. PrizePicks has a revolutionary, and I've never seen this before, way to go about daily fantasy sports. If somebody gets injured in NFL or college football top 25 matchups, and the player exits the game in the first half and doesn't return for the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. This is unheard of. So get in on the action today. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We thank PrizePicks for sponsoring LOE today.
All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast the way we always do, and it's LOE 3 presented by FanDuel. 3 player props each that Gino and I are betting on between the Eagles and the Jets. Let's take a look at what we've got for this game. And, Gino, it's interesting. I'm hanging on by a thread. I got my Dallas Goedert anytime touchdown. I feel like those are the bets I'm confident in, but I still am just I'm not hitting my groove. I need one of these perfect 3-0 weeks.
We'll get there.
I know. I'm getting better, I feel like, each week, right? But
it's a weird beginning to the season. It's a weird beginning to the season when it comes to just statistical output. I think it's very on par with last year, but we're getting into the swing of things. I think we're kind of finding the identity of who they are, what they like to attack. I think we finally figured out that they're going to use Dallas Goedert, so we go about it that way. DeAndre Swift finally is an element in the passing game, and there's a couple ones that I think we want to try and hit a little bit bigger than just your normal Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. So
I was gonna say, I feel dirty riding that bet.
Yeah, we could do it every week and just hit 1-0.
Let us all tell you. Well, we're going to tell you right now on the show. Bet Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown, okay? And then that's always your extra 4th bet from us, okay? That's our advice for the 4th. But let's get into our 3 for Eagles Jets, and we'll start with. Let's ride with our Dallas Goedert bets because he had a massive game last week, 8 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. Gino, I'm banking on him getting back in the end zone against New York. They have a good corner, although he's questionable right now. Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed is out, by the way. We didn't mention that in segment 1. But Dallas Goedert, regardless, is going to be, I think, a primary focus of this passing attack yet again. I'm taking the anytime touchdown at plus 230. You're taking 60-plus yards for Dallas at plus 225. I'm confident in both of those bets. I think he's going to – that game, I think it was kind of like Haason Reddick with the sack against Washington. The dam is broken now, and I think he's going to be unleashed.
And this feels like one of those games that outside of the numbers, it might be tough early on with how good Sauce Gardner is and
you need
how much depth they have there. Yeah, Dallas Goedert, as good as the safety tandem is there in New York and as good as their linebackers are, it's like, let's just get the ball to him. Let's show what our identity is. We're going to instill our will here. We're going to still pass the football.
Yeah.
And then when you figure out you have to cover the middle of the field, well, that's when the explosive element is going to open up. If they want to keep everything underneath, let's just have an old school Zach Ertz style game where they just hit him for 8 to 10 touches and he, unlike Zach Ertz, can get some yards after the catch.
I agree. I'm also going to ride with DeVonta Smith this week, having a bounce back game. Last week got targeted, twice, I think? Over 52.5 receiving yards for me with this bet, minus 114. This is the theme, the trend of the Eagles. When one of their star pass catchers does not get involved, they make an extra emphasis the following week to get that guy involved. They did that with DeVonta Smith last year. They did that with both A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert this year. I love that they're conscious of this element of the offense. I think DeVonta Smith, especially with the corner injuries, and maybe the focus being on a red-hot A.J. Brown right now, who has more receiving yards the last 3 weeks than any receiver, that might be the focus for the Jets defense. Give me a big day from DeVonta Smith.
And it looks like DJ Reed is out, the corner opposite.
Looks like it.
Sauce Gardner, so it looks like Bryce Hall is going to get the start for a second consecutive week there. And we know that the Jets don't like to change their sides for their corners. They're going to keep those guys on either side. Devontae's going to have some swings against Sauce, so is AJ. But on the other side, you got to hope that those guys win that matchup against Bryce Hall. And I like Devontae this week, especially if they go about the way of trying to take away the explosives. DeVonta Smith is also a very good possession style wide receiver where you can hit him in the number. You can hit him in the numbers, in the hands, outside of the numbers, inside the hashes, just winning leverage routes and just with timing. And I think they can kind of do that this week with him. If things aren't going down the field, it's going to be those underneath playmakers. And that's kind of the style that I'm rolling with this week.
I find it so ridiculous that NFL defenses don't shadow a lot of the time with corners. Like, if I'm the Eagles, why not just have OZ playing on Sauce's side and then have DeVonta Smith in the slot and A.J. Brown on the other side every single play? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm riding with DeVonta over 52.5 receiving yards. You're taking the over on DeAndre Swift receiving yards at 16.5. I think this is an easy bet at minus 114. He's been, as you mentioned, getting continuously more involved in the passing attack the last few games against the Commanders and against the Rams. I think that trend will continue, and that might be one catch, Gino, is all he needs to get over 16 yards.
A Jets front that they like to get after it. They like to get upfield, right? And if you're going to talk about those blitzes coming your way, we got to find the hot. Let's get DeAndre Swift out into the flat real quick. I was hoping there was an alternate on his over when it comes to his receiving yards. I think he could have like 35 to 40 this game, and that would be pretty easy.
Over. Yeah,
absolutely. And he's just continuing to become more and more dynamic. And they've really figured out, like, hey, we got 5 guys that we can put that ball in their hands, and they can make magic in the open field. Every one of these guys, why I'm so confident when it comes to the yardage totals, is yards after the catch. It's not like these guys are getting the ball and like they're just going down to the ground. Like, all of these guys can make one guy miss in the open field and boom, you hit your over total right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then we got 2 more bets here. I took the over on Jalen Hurts, 45.5 rushing yards. I think he was finally unleashed as a runner last week against the Rams. He felt more comfortable scrambling. I think this week against the Jets, as you mentioned, they could blitz more. Maybe he's running. I like the over on that 45.5. And then your final bet is the Eagles defense with an anytime touchdown. I love this one at plus 490. Zach Wilson, prone to give the football away, hold on to the ball. The Eagles are one of the top teams in takeaways this year, especially with forced fumbles. Their defensive line is incredible right now, so I really like this bet.
Where we've talked about Jalen Hurts isn't one of those snowball style quarterbacks where once things go bad, it continues to go down the mountain. Zach Wilson.
I was going to say, same can't be said.
If you ever played Super Mario 64, the one level where it's all the penguins on the ice mountain and you just slide down that ice slide, that's Zach Wilson. I mean, that's him. He's going to throw 1, he'll throw 2, he'll throw 3. You'll get a fumble if you continue to just stay on him, but it all comes down to that run game. What do I know? I know the Eagles can pass the ball. I know the Eagles can run the ball, and I know they can stop the run as well. And if they take away the run from the Jets, it's going to force Zach Wilson's hand. And if the Eagles have a lead at any time in this game, I think like quarter 3, 6 minutes left, prime territory. The Eagles go up by like 2.5 scores. Zach Wilson gets the ball, tries to push it down the field. Boom, James Bradbury's there, takes to the crib.
LOE3 is presented, as always, by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. We're going to wrap up the show. We'll see you on Sunday after the game, Eagles-Jets. The post-game show, hopefully, we're going to be talking about another win, 6 in a row. We'll be on after that for sure. And then 5 more shows all week long. We're your only daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Shout out to our everydayers for making us your first listen Monday through Friday. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.